Aqua is everyone's favorite little gremlin, right? Who doesn't love Aqua? There's something interesting about her that stuck out to me. Yellow's dream is to be a cowboy. Green's dream is to be a chef. Aqua decided she wanted to be like Kris. I have an idea why that is. We know that Asgore loved talking to the flowers as he tended to them. And I believe he would talk about specific topics with each flower. Asgore associates Kris with Cyan, according to the flashback, so I imagine that Aqua was told plenty of stories from Kris's childhood. About all the shenanigans they get up to, their chaotic and playful behavior, which led to Aqua ending up like the spitting image of Kris as a child. At least what I imagined they were like back then, based on what we've heard. Well, except one detail, and that's part of the reason I even wanted to make this video. You see, I believe that Aqua's gender is significant, as gender is the only thing separating Kris and Aqua. I recall, upon first seeing her, wondering if she was the idealized version of Kris. The quote-unquote dream, so to speak. She is not only a window into how Kris used to be, but also perhaps the version of themselves Kris wishes they could be. Whether that also means Kris wants to be a girl, we'll just have to see. It's not unheard of that non-binary people transition into the opposite gender they were assigned, after all. Anyway, that Aqua gets to be herself and have a kind and supportive family to boot. On one hand, it has to sting, seeing Kris's current family situation. But on the other hand, I hope that seeing Aqua's display makes Kris realize that opening up and being their real self is actually completely okay. Chapter 5 puts such a heavy emphasis on pursuing your own happiness and staying true to yourself, right? What's interesting is that Flowery is a representation of what Ralsei could be if they let themselves go. How powerful they could be, and more importantly, happy they could be if they stopped holding back and suppressing their identity. Sound familiar? Aqua plays the same role as Flowery does, but for Kris. Kris could be thriving just as much as her, if only they allow themselves to. That's what I think Kris is suppressing and trying to forget. What's hidden with the Forgotten Man and the eggs is their true self, the real Kris, the playful, chaotic, and violent self that Aqua represents. Kris, presumably, learned how to suppress their real self through the therapy they received. Therapy that may or may not have been forced on them by family and or friends. Because to some, Kris's behavior could have been seen as problematic, something to be quote-unquote fixed. At the cost of their mental health and sense of self, Kris has been masking away themselves for what I assume have to be years. Aqua doesn't hurt people on purpose, and I like to think that Kris didn't hurt people either. They actively avoid hurting their friends in any way, shape, or form, after all. So I think something drastic must have happened to prompt Kris going to a therapist. All this to say, I believe Aqua showing up now, in Chapter 5, is foreshadowing. Chapter 5 is supposed to be the final, for fun, chapter before the story takes a serious turn. I think it's safe to assume that stakes will be raised and the party will have to resort to drastic measures. Ralsei will likely stop holding back and allow themselves to use everything at their disposal. We know that Kris, too, has been holding back until now. They are far stronger than they let on. Just like Ralsei, they nerfed themselves, using a weaker weapon when they always have their knife in their pocket. Aqua even asks Kris why they don't use their knife, like she does. To her, it doesn't make any sense. But for Kris to use their knife in the Dark World as a weapon, it would mean confronting their true self. I think Kris might be scared of what they could do with that knife. And currently, making that plunge doesn't feel feasible. But after Chapter 5, with its strong themes of identity, I just have a hunch that Kris will use their knife in the remaining chapters. In the same way that Ralsei saved Susie with a fire spell, perhaps something similar will happen in Chapter 6. Calling it now, Kris will be faced with a situation where using their knife is the only way to solve the problem. That's when we'll see the knife in action, I think. Please age well, it would be so cool. In Rolsey's words, Kris needs to stop pretending to be something they're not. Which is what I think Flowery is referring to, by the way, when he asks what's wrong with it. Both Rolsey and Kris are pretending to be something they're not by suppressing their real identities. We know for a fact that both Susie and Noelle love the real Kris. Like whenever Kris, or we, do actions that align with their true self, Susie and Noelle are always so delighted. Noelle especially. She really misses who Kris used to be. She might have been outwardly upset by their actions, but on the inside, she always did appreciate Kris for who they were. Who they are, I mean. That version of Kris is still in there. It just needs to properly come to the surface. One more thing I wanted to touch on before I go. I would be remiss not to talk about Pink, because there's some blatant parallels between her and Kris as well. Pink represents not just Kris, but their relationship with the soul as a whole. And if I am to take anything from her boss battle, it's that Kris will eventually reconcile with the soul in the future. I'm saying Kris specifically, because up until now, they're the one butting heads with us, hiding critical information, and most importantly, Kris refuses to communicate with us when it would solve so many issues instantly. While their skepticism and lack of trust is understandable, Kris has no idea just how willing the soul would be to help them. I can't speak for everyone, of course, but I know for sure I would be Team Kris if they let me in. I would imagine it would be like Kris having full autonomy while we're still inside them. They get to do whatever they want and just be Kris. So yeah, that's the message. I propose Kris will accept their real self and eventually us as well. Anyway, thanks for listening to my 3 AM Deltarune thoughts made manifest. It's not really a theory per se, but I wanted to put this out to the world instead of it sitting in my head while I'm trying to sleep. Let's see how well or poorly this ages next year, huh?